why don't we just start with the stack you're using? What is your AI stack that you're using to make these films?
Let's do it, man.
Today we have Caleb Ward on the podcast. Now, he's a buddy. He used to work at School of Motion. He's a marketing genius. But the reason I asked him to come on was because very recently he created 2 videos that have gone mega viral. A Star Wars trailer and a Lord of the Rings trailer that are heavily inspired by the look of Wes Anderson's films. And they have been viewed millions of times and have opened up all kinds of doors for Caleb. So today I'm going to ask him about how he actually made the videos. I want to get into the weeds a little bit with him, find out what tools he used and how he was able to use them. I want to find out how he thinks about doing things like this, because this is actually the 3rd time he's gone viral in his life. He seems to have a knack for it. So now let's meet Caleb. But before we do, I have one favor. This podcast is being delivered to you for free. And all I ask in return is a humble click. Would you please click on the like button and then subscribe to our channel? We are putting out lots and lots of content, and it's all very helpful if you're into the world of design, animation, and if you want to learn more about this AI stuff, we're going to be talking about that too. All right, let's get into it. Well, Caleb, it's been a while, buddy. It's really good to have you. At long last, I feel like this was really a long time coming to actually have you on the School of Motion podcast. Thank you for doing this, man. I'm really excited to dig in to what you've been up to.
Hey, man, I am just so grateful to be on the podcast. It's funny. I feel like the last time I was on the podcast, I was interviewing you. So this is a cool flip.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you've done something kind of notable now that I'm actually really, really curious about. But before we get into that, I'm sure a lot of people listening to this aren't as familiar with you as I am. They should be, and they will be soon. But maybe you could just give everybody a quick background, sort of how did you end up, where you are doing the thing that you just did?
Yeah, so my background has always been in helping artists, specifically filmmakers and motion designers. And so I started out my career writing content for filmmakers and creating tutorials at a company called Premium Beat, and had a blast over there with a lot of really talented folks. And then I transitioned into a little company called School of Motion. I don't know if your audience has heard of it before. And had the pleasure of working alongside you and just the amazing team, and really helping to be a part of School of Motion in some of those early days. And so it was really awesome just to be just a big After Effects nerd who was just really passionate about motion design. And together we were able to make all sorts of awesome tutorials and pieces of content and really just bring the community together. So had a lot of fun doing that. And right before the pandemic hit in January of 2020, I transitioned over to working full-time with Curious Refuge, which is my own company. And essentially we help entrepreneurs and creative people just express more of their creativity. And so we're really passionate about helping folks unlock the power of tools to create artistic projects, to see their ideas in action. And we also take on clients for projects like marketing. And so one of our biggest clients is a company called Rebelway, and they do high-end visual effects training. So they teach tools like Houdini and Nuke, just stuff that is nerdy beyond my artistic skills. And they do some really cool stuff with some awesome studios. So really just at every step of the process, I feel like I've been helping artists and then also trying to just geek out and contextualize tools, which I think speaks a little bit to kind of where we're at today and some of the interesting things that have been happening to us over the last few weeks.
Cool, that's awesome. And I've met I don't know how he pronounces it, Saber, the founder of Rebelway.
Saber.
Yeah, I've talked with him a couple times. Really interesting guy, really cool company. So we'll link to that so everyone can check that out too. So what's interesting about you is you called yourself an After Effects nerd, and that is definitely I think accurate. But I was trying to think of what you actually are. You know how when you meet somebody, there's this tick everybody has, oh, what do you do? And it's really hard, I think, for just sort of even just the average motion designer that works at a studio and just does motion design all day to define what it is you do or what you are professionally. Yeah. And it's got to be way harder for you because, I've seen you're a marketer. I mean, that's what you were doing at School of Motion, but you were also a content creator in that role. You're also an artist. I mean, you can design and animate and do all these things. So how do you think of yourself professionally at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question. And I think certain projects that I do, like the ones that we're going to talk about soon, take off, and then it changes almost like your own view of yourself and the way that you have a relationship in communicating your story with other people. So I think it's something that evolves, but generally I would say my background is in marketing and then also content creation. And so I think I have this dance where I go back and forth, and I would think a lot of people who would consider themselves motion designers and that are a part of the School of Motion community have this relationship where they, do things to pay the bills that are probably a little more in the marketing and advertising space. And then they're really passionate about storytelling and getting their fun artistic projects out there. And those probably don't pay the bills as much. And I love like what that thing that you always say, one for the meal, one for the real. And right. I feel like a lot of, I use that phrase all the time and people love it. I feel like, specifically some of the projects we've been doing recently were more one for the real that I didn't think would end up turning into one for the meal. So I just really think like I'm just a marketing nerd that loves telling stories and testing the limits of certain tools, and every now and then something happens and certain ideas take off, and so I don't know, like maybe I'm just more of a kid that got lucky. It's hard to fully describe, I think, what I do, but what I hope to do going forward is really just inspire artists like through our work and train them to contextualize and use these new emerging tools to create awesome stuff.
That's great, man. I think that was really well said. I definitely see you as like a tinkerer, and I'm like that too. I always want to try the newest thing and then figure out how I can combine it with this other thing to create something. There's like this idea of remixing, I think, in artistry that you really embody. By the way, I just have to say it and set the record straight. One for the meal, one for the real. I didn't come up with that. I actually stole that from one of my old business partners, Colin Cameron, who was one of my partners at Toil, and he probably stole it from somebody else. So we're just paying it forward, basically. I'm so glad that I've been able to spread that, though. So let's talk about the main reason that I asked you to come on and talk about this. So you recently, well, let me tell how it looked from my point of view, and then you can. Then I want to hear what it was like on the inside. So I started seeing this trailer everywhere on the internet. Like I saw it once on Twitter, and then all of a sudden it was everywhere. And then I saw it in an article, and then people were telling me about it and sending it to me. And it was a Wes-Anderson-inspired trailer for Star Wars. And it was just so, like, the tone was perfect, and like the writing and everything was just so well done. And I'm thinking, who did this? This is great. And then maybe a week later, someone tagged you on Twitter, and I was like, oh my God, Caleb did that. And I texted you immediately. I think I texted you that night. I was like, dude, was that you? And since then, you released another trailer for Lord of the Rings. But let's start with the Star Wars one, because that, from the outside, that seemed like mega viral, instantly was everywhere. It was being talked about on podcasts I listened to. Where did that come from? Tell us the story of that trailer.
Yeah. So it's really funny because up to that point, a lot of the content that I had been working on and what I was really passionate was just straight up video tutorials. So just contextualizing certain tools like Canva or Squarespace. These are just tools that I use every day. And so I'm like, yeah, might as well use my video editing skills to, teach people these tools. And those are a lot of work to put together. And I just got done working on one that took like a month to put together, so much work. And I was like, that was one for the meal. I'm really tired. Kind of want to do something fun. And so obviously all of these artificial intelligence tools have been coming out. There's been all of these incredible projects that people have been putting out on YouTube and on Reddit. And I think one of the cooler projects that has come out has been that Harry Potter by Balenciaga video.
Amazing, yeah.
I don't know if you saw it. It's so good. And I think like that one was the first one that contextualized the idea of video-based storytelling for these AI tools. I think up to this point, there had been a few, but they weren't entertaining enough for me to be like, oh, wow, I would like love to see more of that, or I would share that with somebody else. And so I think that seeing some of these newer projects got my brain wondering and imagining, okay, how can we take these tools and then contextualize them in an actual like cinematic or filmmaking context? And that's really a huge question that's on the minds of everybody out here in Los Angeles right now. And so I was just curious. And so I just started tinkering around with all of these incredible AI tools that have come out recently. And I really wanted to make it a point to use as much AI as possible. So this is crazy. We used AI to come up with the idea for the video. Like I didn't want the idea to come from me. I wanted ChatGPT to come up with the idea because I really wanted to push the limits of these tools. So I basically went to ChatGPT and I was like, hey, there's a lot of potential here for artificial intelligence tools to create fun videos based on, creative projects. Give me some ideas that people might enjoy. And it came up with a bunch of ideas, and Star Wars by Wes Anderson was one of them. And instantly I was like, oh yeah, I think that would do well. And then Wes Anderson's visual aesthetic lends itself to a little bit more static imagery, which is important because there's not fantastic tools at this point that can just do great moving shots with artificial intelligence. And so, we went to the ChatGPT for the idea, and then I was like, hey, it should write the script. Like, what? Why are we stopping here? And so ChatGPT wrote a rough script, and then I just went in and edited it and kind of casted some of the characters as certain people, and then went over into a tool called Midjourney, which is one of the more realistic art generation tools. And it had a recent update in late March, I believe, that kind of lended itself to really realistic rendering and AI text to image generation. And so I was able to get some really good results from there. And then just taking all of those images and either using online tools to animate faces or to do just certain things, and then also just working with After Effects to do some light animation work. And so I think all of that stuff, when you just combine it with slightly clever video editing, just resulted in something that feels pretty cool. And I think it's just new. And I think that's why people are so excited about it, because I am by no means the only person that's going to be creating trailers like this going forward. I think YouTube is going to be flooded with them within the next couple of months. But I think just because this was the first practical trailer attempt, I think that it just, caught people's imaginations and took off.
Well, I don't know if you've noticed, so I went to YouTube this morning to watch the video again. And because I've been watching it, a few times, I think it's now starting to feed me more of those videos. And I saw someone has already done the Shrek in the style of Wes Anderson. So I mean, I think that you've definitely inspired a bunch of people to go out and try to do this. And I even said to you, I think when we were talking about this, that Wes Anderson is actually the perfect director to kind of cop for this, because a lot of his camera work is very static and kind of lends itself to that. I want to dig deeper into the production later on, but I want to. You said this word a bunch of times. I want to call it out. You said you'd like to contextualize how these tools can be used. And I think that comes back to what you were saying before about being like a kid like that just likes to tinker with new things. Now, I want to understand, because like I'd seen things like this before. The Balenciaga thing was the closest analog, I guess, but I'd seen a lot on Twitter people doing these threads of, the cast of Star Wars if they were presidents, or if presidents were children, and using Midjourney for that. So what were some of the things that you saw out there that kind of inspired you to then take it to the next level and turn it into a full trailer?
Yeah, I mean, there's some really awesome threads on Reddit. If you just go to like the Midjourney subreddit, I spend a lot of my time there because I think like the folks over there are really on the cutting edge of exploring the prompts and sharing it with other people. And so I've seen like quite a few projects over there of like Guardians of the Galaxy as like a 1960s sci-fi movie, and if the Avengers were created in like paper mache, like just like really funny stuff. And so I think just like seeing some of those things inspired a little more of like, okay, if we can do this with static imagery, and as someone who knows After Effects and a little bit of like motion design and visual effects stuff, maybe we then can take the static imagery and make it move in a convincing way. And so I think it was just a little bit of just creativity and just imagining like what these tools could be. And I don't feel like anything I did was something that the average person listening to this podcast couldn't do. It's not technically an impossible task. It's just learning how to plug in each part of these AI tools in the production pipeline that I think was special.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree. I think with a lot of things that go viral, you look at it and in hindsight, it's so obvious that, oh, that's a good idea. And it really is just about having the idea, which I think actually a lot of people do, but then they don't actually do the thing. You actually did the thing, which is why what's happening to you is happening. When did you start to realize? So like, tell me about posting it and then like what happened? When did you start to feel like, oh, wow, this is actually kind of spreading pretty fast?
Yeah, so I posted it on a Friday afternoon. It was like 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I made it a point when I was working on this project, I didn't want to use my desktop computer. I just wanted to use my laptop. And because I wanted to kind of, again, like make a point and contextualize, like anybody with anywhere can do this. Like you don't have to have like a crazy machine. And so I posted the video and then just went to the pool and hung out and checked on the video right before I went to bed. Had like 200 views, which at 200 views, I was like, oh, that's pretty good for one of our videos. Not bad. Went to bed. When I woke up on TikTok, it had over 500,000 views and, it was blowing up across, every platform basically. And then by that afternoon, some articles started rolling in. And so that was Saturday. It was a very, very weird Saturday. And then Sunday rolls around and I'm just hanging out with my friends like I do every Sunday. And we're just playing some Mario Kart. And I looked down at my phone and the Hollywood Reporter had written about it. And so when that happened, I knew, okay, this is something that's very special and going to be a big deal. And so within the next 2 days, it had been in all over the major online publications that cover things related to like movies and technology, which was really cool. That's amazing. And did anyone reach out to you or were they just writing about it and then you just happened to see it? A few people reached out to me. I mean, it's just like, it's so weird. So the people at Yahoo reached out, Rotten Tomatoes has reached out. Like publication wise, we've had the Hollywood Reporter reach out. We actually have an article dropping today, the day of recording, over on their website. We'll see. It's probably going to be negative, but we'll see how it goes. And so, I mean, a lot of people just covered it without reaching out, which I thought was surprising because I think learning some of the technical components and like how the process went down is kind of interesting. But I'm glad to share it with anyone who wants to talk about it. And I'm glad we're on this podcast to shed a little more light into that process as well. Yeah. Well, I mean, it must be interesting for you, especially being in Los Angeles, and we're recording this in the middle of a WGA writer's strike. And there is a lot of controversy around these. So it's funny that you said it's probably a negative article. I mean, I don't know if I would guess one way or the other, but I wanted to ask you about that. I mean, you've obviously you've seen a lot of people talk about it on social media. I mean, there's probably no way you could even look at all of the comments that, that people are making and retweeting and this and that. But overall, have you noticed like a split between positive and negative reactions, or is it more weighted to one side or the other? Yeah, so it's funny because I feel like everyday fans of either Star Wars or Wes Anderson generally have been positive. Like it's been from the community, like 90% positive, which is awesome. And again, like this was just a fun experiment. Like I in no way was like trying to like, let's make a statement about the role of like writers in Hollywood. It was just like, let's tinker around, like you said, and make something fun with like these tools. And generally, like when I posted it and it was going viral, it was very, very positive. And so people were like, this is such a fun idea. I would totally like Disney, please, like they were tagging Disney, please make this movie. You have no idea like how many times I would watch it. And so that was really cool to see. And we still get tons of positive comments every single day. The majority are like super positive. Yeah, that's awesome. When news publications started coming out though, that's when things shifted a little bit because I think I think, I know news publications get more clicks whenever they're divisive and, polarizing things. And so that's when things started getting more polarized. And so then we started seeing a lot more people commenting and, this is ridiculous. This doesn't look at all like Wes Anderson, or like you guys are destroying art forever. And, just I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what the future will hold for artists. And, I think people can tend to be fearful or pessimistic about these tools. But, for me, I think these tools are something that's very, it's just changing the way that we tell stories. It's not getting rid of storytellers. It's just empowering them with new tools. And so I don't think I would have been able to make this video without these tools. And I think other people will create some really cool stuff that wouldn't have been possible any other way as well. So
yeah. That's how I feel too. Let's talk about the Lord of the Rings one. So that one came, pretty close on the heels of the Star Wars one. Talk about that one. I mean, by that time you obviously knew you had something. And in my mind, I don't even know that I would have tried to catch fire twice in a row like that. Because I think I would have been devastated if that one just fell flat and no one watched it. But,
right.
Yeah, talk about like why you made that one and what happened after you published that.
Yeah, so I was very curious because, you go viral once and you're like, okay, that's cool. I got super lucky. It was just a time and place, like makes sense, whatever. And so I was completely open-handed with it, like really just laughing the whole time that it was happening because it just felt so silly. But I was really curious to see, okay, did we just catch fire and get super, super lucky with this? Or could this be replicatable? Because if it's replicatable, there's huge opportunities there, right? And so I was like, okay, we did Star Wars, like what is the obvious next thing to do, right? Like Lord of the Rings, totally. And so I went through the exact same process that I went through with Star Wars, but I tried to elevate it a little bit more and use a few more tools to push further into like some depth mapping and parallaxing techniques and things like that. Put the video out there, and statistically it's doing much better than the Star Wars video even did in terms of traffic and velocity and watch time and all of those things. Like, it's funny because like my channel, it's like the views are like this, and then Star Wars came out, it's like a huge peak, and then it like tapered back down, and then like Lord of the Rings came out and it's like so much bigger than Star Wars. So I think it's going to be even more popular in the next couple of weeks, which is crazy. And so it was really interesting to get that out there. And again, just tons of articles started writing about it. And I think the Lord of the Rings one opened up more opportunities, and we've had more inquiries now than we could possibly handle. And so it's really interesting.
Yeah. Why don't you talk about some of those? Like, and I know some of them you probably can't get too into specifics, but what are the types of things that people are saying to you and offering to you for this?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, especially for the School of Motion audience, because I don't think any of the opportunities that are being extended to me couldn't also be done by like I said, the average member of the School of Motion community that has some storytelling skills. But it's been literally all over the place. So everything from indie filmmakers wanting to use AI to, work on legitimate films with budgets, all the way to sitting in rooms with literal Hollywood executives that like have worked on big projects. I can't say who they are, but like you've seen their movies, crowding around a table to talk about what AI means for the future of Hollywood. And so it's been all over the place. And we obviously, the advertising industry has been reaching out to us, studios wanting to learn our process, everyday people who are looking to create a pitch for a film or a project that they want to pitch and get out there. So it's been every possible type of person reaching out, and it's been really cool, honestly. Like, I think this is going to unlock a new form of workflows and a new form of video in the pipeline for commercials, for pre-vising movies, for working in post-production, and I think eventually for the actual production process itself. So it's cool. And I think everyone's imagination is spinning, and I think everyone's fears are there as well right now. So it's just unknown territory, I think.
Yeah. So let's talk about the production process, because I think, I would imagine, right, the School of Motion audience, when they see this, they recognize, that was, a fake reflection on the TIE fighter and you just, moved it in Y position. Like we see exactly how you did it. But then there's parts of it that probably most people don't understand. Like, how did you get them to talk and get their faces to move and stuff like that?
Right.
And so, how did you get the voiceover to sound like that? And so you've said that you don't think you could have done this without these tools. I disagree because I know that you're a really good shooter too. You can actually shoot really beautiful video. You can design, you can animate, you're a great editor. You understand how to tell stories. If you had the budget and the time, you could actually have done this without all of these tools, but you wouldn't have because it would have been prohibitively expensive, right? And this is kind of the case I keep making for these tools is that sometimes it unlocks a new art form, right? I've seen these weird fever dream animations that I don't think you could make another way. But what you made, you could make another way. It's just you wouldn't have. It's just too time consuming. But now, I think you told me when we were talking the other day, these take you a couple of days to make at this point. So why don't we just start with the stack you're using? What is your AI stack that you're using to make these films?
Let's do it, man. So like I said, it starts with ChatGPT to create the script, and it could come up with great ideas as well. And after you have a script, then you need to block it out. So it's really interesting. Like these tools generated not only the script, but also the shot list. So I'm like, here's the script. Can you give me a shot list of what you think would make for a good Wes Anderson trailer?
Wow.
And it spit out a shot list. And I didn't use that shot list word for word, but it was an amazing starting off point. There's definitely shots from the shot list that it created in there. So you have the shot list, and then you need to go over to Midjourney. And if anyone's ever used Midjourney, it's pretty intuitive to use, but there is this kind of tagging and a little bit of like specific codes that you need to have to get really good imagery. And so we use ChatGPT to come up with ideas for some of those codes. So you plug those into Midjourney, and at that point, you're prompt mastering, which is like this really interesting new art field that is opening up where it's essentially creative directing the imagery that's coming from ChatGPT from Midjourney, and adjusting things to try to get the specific look or the specific design that you want. And so it took quite a bit of work to sift through the images that were coming through. I would say that 98 to 99% of them were not ever going to make the cut and just weren't very good. But some of them really were awesome. And so we were able to take the images and essentially just lay it down in an After Effects timeline, in a Premiere Pro timeline. And we, for the voiceover, we used a tool called 11 Labs, which basically is a text to audio tool that I think they're one of the most popular. And you just type in your text and it'll spit out a voice, and they're pretty good voices. You can tell that there's a slight lack of humanity in the voice, but it's close. And so essentially you just download that, and it won't be perfect, but just like you would be working with a voiceover artist, you take multiple takes and you just put the parts that work and remove the parts that don't work, and you string it together. And then you throw all the images together and you have like a trailer animatic, essentially. And so from there, you can animate the faces. There's all sorts of tools online. The most popular is DID. And, it just creates those like really like weird, like blinking head tilts, and they have lip sync, but the lip sync isn't super believable, I think, at this point. And so I tried to not show lips moving because I wanted it to feel as realistic as possible. And so, like once you have some of the facial movements, you can go over into After Effects and do masking, background removal. You could use Photoshop for background removals. I used Canva for doing a lot of photo editing because it was just faster and easier. And from there, you just do your After Effects thing, mask, puppet tools, keyframes, all that good stuff. And throw it all together in a Premiere Pro timeline with some titles, and boom, you got yourself an AI trailer.
So easy. Wait, so you used the term prompt mastering, and I've heard it called prompt engineering, but whatever it is, it's now a thing. how difficult was that? Because I've used Midjourney quite a bit. I've used Dolly, I've used Firefly. I've never used Stable Diffusion because you have to. It's a little bit more technical to get into it. Midjourney's so easy, but I do find that if I have an idea in my head and I try to describe it, it never comes out like I think it is. And while it's intuitive to get something out of it, it's not that intuitive to know what word you should change and in what way to get it to do what it's doing, right? So how did you figure that part out? Like, I mean, you said you used ChatGPT, but was that kind of it? Did that solve that for you?
Well, it's really interesting. There are a lot of, if you go to Midjourney's actual website, they have galleries of other people's artwork. And so in each image, you can click on it and it'll show you the prompts that they use to generate that artwork. And so Midjourney, unless you pay for the most expensive version, always publicly shows what you upres. And so it's really cool because you basically just have insight into everything that the community is creating. And so I was able to use that to kind of back and forth see, okay, what are the prompts that other people are using to get really cool imagery. And so, just went there and found a lot of those like cinematic and realism tags that people were using to push Midjourney. And that was a big thing because Midjourney 5 and 5.1 came out recently. And those are the ones that really started to create some like really incredible, realistic images. And it's so cool because you can literally go in and type in, I want, let's say Star Wars Princess Leia, and I want her to be in the style of Wes Anderson. I want it to be shot in a 50 millimeter lens, f2.8, with Kodak T200 film, and I want the color grading to be pastel, and it boom will spit it out. And so it can get so granular now. You can type in any camera and it'll like simulate that camera style. So it's very interesting. Like this is definitely going to be the future of storytelling.
Yeah. Well, I keep thinking, I mean, I don't know if you've played with Firefly yet, but the interface is so much better than Midjourney. It's more intuitive as far as like not knowing everything you need to know about prompt engineering. You can still get close, but the results are, I mean, I'd say like 10% of what you get with Midjourney. Midjourney is just by far the easiest one to get like good stuff out of. That's really interesting. So what were the limitations that you ran into? We talked about already how Wes Anderson style lends itself very well to this because you don't have to have a moving camera and you can just have kind of static compositions, just have the characters look at you and put their name up. But, like, were there things you tried to do that you were unable to, or like thinking ahead, are there things that you're like, it's just not ready to do this yet?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think like from a cinematic and filmmaking perspective, like we're not in the place where you can just go in and type into a tool, like give me a scene of, I don't know, like a young Elvis Presley, like talking about his day, and it's going to spit out like Elvis chatting with his lips. Like we're not there. And so like the biggest limitation is you have images and you need to make those images move. And so like you're really essentially just, duct taping tools together to specifically get a look. And really a big part of it is it's really interesting. Like you run to Midjourney and see what it's giving you. And then you as an After Effects artist can use your creativity to be like, okay, what are some things that I can do with what it's giving me that, I might be able to make interesting and at least semi-realistic or believable. And so, I mean, the biggest limitation, I think, was movement. Mm-hmm. And I think that will be obviously the bigger limitation moving forward. And then realism as it relates to human expression, because I don't know if any of these tools are going to be taken super seriously from an audience until we can get past that uncanny valley. Right. But we're close because I think we were with some of the earlier iterations of Midjourney. It was very uncanny valley. But now we're in the photorealism space where you literally cannot tell the difference between an image produced in Midjourney and an image shot on just a regular camera. And so,
unless you count the fingers sometimes. And
yeah. There'll be 6 fingers, but we don't look at that part. Yeah. But generally, I mean, you can't. And there's like some awesome threads online of people that are like, here are 2 images. Can you guess which one is real? And you can't. And so I think if we've gone photorealism with photography this quick, like it's not going to be very long until some of these tools are creating video realism.
Yeah. So, let's get back to I guess the limitations of these things. So you said that maybe 90% or more of the images that you generated you couldn't use. Do you think that is, could that be solved by you getting more experienced using it? Or is it just the nature of these tools right now that it's a little bit of a random walk? You don't really know what you're going to get until you put it in and you wait a minute.
Yeah, I think you can do prompting to try to get a specific result. But I think generally you just have to, it's a back and forth process. I think it has to be a back and forth process. And it's really cool because I think it allows you to get more artwork and see more creative potential. It's like having like a VFX team or a concept artist like cranking out like 100 iterations of a shot as opposed to just one. And so I think it's cool because it allows you to be essentially a curator that picks and chooses what would work best for the scene. But again, at the same time, it creates frustration because it's like, if there is a very specific thing that you have in your mind that you want to see, it is a little challenging to get it to pull that off. Like you have to run through quite a few prompts to get there.
Yeah.
So, it can be a frustrating experience, especially depending on the projects that you're working on. But, I think it's just going to be part of the process going forward.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I don't know. I mean, as an artist, right? If I'm designing something, I want the image in my head to mirror what I'm seeing on screen. And if I can't do that, that's frustrating. But if I'm in my, storyteller mode or my marketer mode, or even like maybe creative director, art director mode, then I'm much more open to like having things bounce off of me and this back and forth. And, I interviewed this guy, Dan Jeffries, who is the CIO of Stability AI. They make Stable Diffusion. And this was months ago, but he sort of described his utopian vision of how these things work in the future, where it really becomes like a helper, like an apprentice to the artist that can just bounce ideas back and forth and iterate on things for you, and then you use your taste. And I think what the point I would make to people watching this that think this is really cool and want to try this, my gut on why these worked so well for you is because of your taste, because you knew when it was Wes Anderson-y and when it wasn't, right? I'm sure like someone, and I assume knowing you probably like Wes Anderson movies, so you probably like really deeply knew like what to look for. So my take on it is that your taste is actually going to become far more valuable than it was in the past, because now all of us are curating a heck of a lot more. I want to talk about some of the controversial parts of this, I guess. I'm sure you were expecting some amount of negative feedback on it, but how do you approach that question of, why don't we start with the thing everyone talks about, which is that these AIs are trained on artwork that doesn't belong to the companies that are now charging you to use the AI, right? Which I totally get. So how do you look at that? How does that affect the way you think about Midjourney?
Yeah, I am definitely more in the camp of the whole like steal like an artist realm of thinking about creativity. And that idea is essentially that all of us are pulling our creative ideas from other inspiration in our past. We just don't, as humans, know off the top of our head where those sources are coming from, right? And so like I got excited about, I don't know, this like Wes Anderson Star Wars thing, but it's like a lot of the jokes and things like that are probably being pulled from other funny things that I've seen in the past, or Wes Anderson tropes that I'm not like fully realizing off the top of my head.
Right.
But, it just found itself in this project. And so I think that AI tools have the ability to credit the artists that are creating the imagery. But for me, I'm super excited whenever I see people, taking the idea that we had for our video and making their iterations. Like it makes me excited to have my work be iterative in other people's projects. And so for me personally, I don't find it to be a huge problem that these machines are pulling imagery from other people's artwork, but I know for a fact that other people disagree with me on that.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just going to be something that is figured out in the long run. And I don't know if like these tools are going to start paying royalties, like certain percentages of royalties to artists, whenever they pull certain images from them. But now there's so much AI generated art that like how could you possibly know what is an iterative design from one artist to another now? So I honestly have no idea. But I really think that artists should get their due. But like everyone else in the world right now, it's really impossible to know how to fully rectify all of this.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, I did a video on this actually because I'm sure you saw the Corridor Digital video where they basically shot footage, but then they wanted to make it look like this specific anime film. So they trained a model on frames from that film, and then it made their video look like it was in the same style as that film. And and then a lot of artists were upset by it. And the way I looked at it was kind of what you said. It's like every artist looked at someone else's work that didn't belong to them, and then their brain kind of, combined all of that into their style, and it comes out in ways that they can't even consciously, explain. And knowing, I've learned more and more about how these tools actually work. That's kind of what they're doing in a way. It's just digital instead of this piece of meat in your skull doing it. And so, philosophically, it's really interesting. Ethically, I do think it would be fair to pay artists if their work is being used to train. I think that would be really fair. Practically, I don't know how the hell you do that, but there are lawsuits now, and I assume there are much smarter legal scholars trying to figure this stuff out. But I think it's good that you're considering it though, because I mean, I think the one thing that I don't like when I hear people talk about this is absolute certainty, because I think we're way too early for any of us to have any of that. All right, so let's talk about the virality a little bit more. So you are a marketer, and you understand, you just mentioned like looking at your YouTube statistics, right? Which I'm sure a lot of creators don't really, worry about that. If you're animating something and you put it up on Vimeo or you put it up on Instagram, or you're really, studying the engagement and all that kind of stuff. But you do that. Do you have any sense of why these went viral right now? Like in hindsight, can you see the obvious reasons why this worked?
Yeah, it's so funny because like whenever I'm putting these videos together, I know that like on social media and YouTube, if you don't hook people within the first 3 seconds, you're not going to get them. And so it's critical to make sure that your better shots are at the very beginning and that you're really, getting people's attention early on. So like, there's definitely playing with the algorithm a bit that you do whenever you're working on these projects. And, I can look at like the click-through rate on the thumbnails and see certain percentages and be like, oh, okay, like that's working really well. Or maybe I should change that. Or the retention score, like with, when are people dropping off into these videos, or when are people really wanting to engage with the video and they go back and rewatch, right? So I'm looking at all this stuff, and it is informing what future videos, the content of future videos will be. And so, I'm really into looking at data to make like informed decisions, but at the same time, I am a fan of these projects. And I think there is, like you said, a certain level of taste or artistic expression, that, you want to pull from as well. So I think it is this balance of like, okay, data would tell me that, I don't know, Harry Potter is next, but that's not the one that we're going to do because I'm like more creatively inspired to do something else, right? So I think it's a balance. Yeah,
that's interesting. There was a conversation that actually just came up this morning on the School of Motion student community about, I guess, the commoditization of motion design and, how tools like these AI tools, but also tools like Canva and just globalization, like, being able to hire artists that are less expensive. Like, how does that affect the ability of someone to like break through the noise? And, I remember when you were working at School of Motion, you would often say like, oh, we're doing empathy-driven marketing, I think is like a term you would use, where you're writing content that is designed to get eyeballs and clicks and sales, but it doesn't work unless you actually care the same way that your audience is going to.
Yes,
and thinking about, because you were describing your process of making this trailer, and I can imagine a scenario where you literally don't have to do anything. Chat GPT writes the script and then it sends that off to Midjourney, and then some new tool that'll come out in a year edits the whole thing and adds music and everything. Will that ever feel the same way a trailer done by an actual fan feels? You know, I mean, it's interesting because you can tell when an article on a blog was written by a content farm, and you can tell when it was written by someone who actually cares, and it's subtle little things. And I suspect with this trailer, it's probably the same thing. I'm just kind of rambling. I don't know. How do you feel about that aspect of it? Like, you know, it still takes a human being to make what you made, even though the production of the pixels wasn't done by a human being for the most part.
Right. I totally agree with you. I think like the human taste is a huge component. And so I don't think in the next 3 to 5 years, like human taste is going to be irrelevant. And, you know, these AI driven content prompts are going to give us better content than what a human could curate. However, I do think like even like what makes content human will eventually, and like fun and quirky, is going to be picked up by AI tools. I did an experiment this last weekend where I had AI write late night comedy, because that feels like something that's incredibly human. Like, you know, comedy, like make me laugh. But I made it a point to, I didn't touch the script at all. It was all AI generated. And the AI like told me what prompts to use and like what to put in the artwork and like where to pause for laughs. Like it was crazy. And I put it together, and like it's not like as funny as like the late night guys. Like Stephen Colbert is amazing, and like the funniness that his humanity brings is like over the top and amazing. But it's also not funny. And I think like if where we're at with AI is the worst version that we're going to have going forward, it only is going to get better from here.
Yeah.
And how quickly it gets better, I don't know. And so, you know, for now, I'd say for the next few years, like human taste absolutely is going to take precedent until these AI tools, like not to get too futuristic and nerdy here, but there's some big innovations with facial tracking related to you consuming your content, where these cameras can tell if you're enjoying watching something, or if you're like starting to fade away, or if something's making you sad or angry or whatever. And so going forward, you can totally see a world where AI generative content is changing the content that's going to be shown to you based on like your relationship with what you're watching. And so once that happens, who knows? But like that's at this point sci-fi, but you know, knowing the way things have progressed, maybe it's 2 or 3 years from now, I don't know.
Yeah, that's really dystopian. But I mean, I think like if I remember I gave a talk at the Half Res conference last year, and this was, I think maybe, I don't know, a week or two after Midjourney had come out. I mean, it was still pretty new, or maybe Stable Diffusion, but like even then it was like, wow, 6 months ago, I never would have believed you if you shown me this stuff. Like, I just would have thought, no, it's impossible. And, you know, that was in October and November. And, you know, here we are in May. And I feel like there are now video generators. There's this thing, I don't know if you played with it, Gen 1, now Gen 2 on the Runway platform, where you can put in a video of Michael Jordan eating spaghetti or Will Smith eating spaghetti, and it'll generate something really dystopian and nightmare fuel. But yeah, I think you're right. The face tracking thing, I wish you hadn't told me about that. That sounds horrible, man. Okay, so you've actually, the audience won't know this, but you've actually had a video go viral before. So just because I think it's a cool story, like, why don't you tell everybody what that was, and like, how did that feel different than what's going on right now for you?
Yeah, so my first video that went viral is very interesting. That was back when 360 cinematography was like a really big deal, and everyone was like, oh my God, 360 is going to be the future of storytelling. And then, you know, it didn't really pan out the way that everyone thought. We're not all sitting here like on an Oculus talking to each other right now, right? So I think that, again, back then I was tinkering with tools, really curious about the creative storytelling potential. And I lived in Dallas, and I know it can be like a little dark, but I'm also like, I have a history degree, and I'm really like fascinated with like contextualizing today through the lens of understanding our past. And so I was like, I wonder if you could take the Zapruder film and comp it using After Effects and like 360 plates to visually give people a sense of like what that experience was like. And The big hope in using that technology was to almost to like get rid of a lot of the myths and conspiracy theories that people have about, Dealey Plaza and like everything that went down, to just, shed logic into the situation. So I put that together, and it's funny because I put it out, didn't really do anything. It was just like flat. And then like 6 months later, all of a sudden, so much traffic. We've had, since the time we released the video, I think it has like maybe like 15 million views or something like that.
It's incredible.
Yeah, it's nuts. But it's really cool. I think it was like a fun way to contextualize a historical event using the footage that we have. And what I love is like the people that write in and they're like, oh wow, like after watching this video, it's changed my perspective about like what's happened, or scholarly articles being written about like how this informs like how researchers look at the past. And so I think it's pretty cool to be a part of those conversations and to inspire people in that way. And I think that pattern is not too dissimilar to what happened with these AI videos. It's just creative tinkering that I think is unlocking some creativity and some opportunities for people. But I think in this instance, a lot of this work is replicatable, whereas the 361 I did back in the day, I don't think you could replicate that very easily.
Yeah, I mean, there's very few like films where that would work, but we'll link to that in the show notes for this, because it's interesting. And now watching you have 2 in a row viral videos, I mean, it really, I think what I hope people take away from this conversation is that, what you've done is you've used skills that, you're right, like probably most of the people listening to this also have, right? They don't have the exact same set that you do, but everybody has taste, and a lot of people can also edit video and pick music, and these tools are very easy to use. The thing you did differently, I think there's 2 things. One is you combined 2 things in a creative way that hadn't been done in exactly this way before. And the other thing is you actually did it. I think that's actually the more rare trait in people like yourself that I always love to see is, just I have an idea and I'm not just going to let it sit as the idea. It's actually going to get done.
Yes.
And that might mean on Saturday, I'm not sitting around doing nothing. Yeah. I'm actually working on it. So moving forward from here, so like we're still very early in this. I think the Star Wars trailer came out about 2 weeks ago as of us recording this. The Lord of the Rings came out even more recently. And we'll also link to your late night AI host, which I thought was great. And then, but now you've got all this opportunity in front of you, right? And you've got a career doing marketing. And then you've got this, like all artists, you've got this side thing of like making content and making art and making little projects. And this has to open up a whole bunch of doors for you, but also AI is changing every single day. Is it a flash in the pan? I don't know. So how are you approaching like the opportunities that are in front of you now versus, long-term and short-term and weighing those?
Yeah, I mean, it is very challenging because I think like there are certain individuals that are just like, we want to fully fund like you to be like the big creative AI innovator out in Hollywood. Like, let's make the AI studio, like, let's get to it. And then there's like all of these smaller projects that are popping up that feel way more practical and like, we can like really put these together. And so it's a hard balance. And, like you said, all of the tools are changing constantly. So even just keeping track, like I have to do research every single day just to see what the heck is new that's coming out that could potentially like have some sort of use case in filmmaking or, video production. And so honestly, it is a challenge to keep track of all these things, but I think it's not going to be the people that like are utilizing one tool. I think it's the people that are going to be able to contextualize all of these tools together in a creative way that are going to innovate things. And institutions like the ones out here in Hollywood, they move really slow. And so I think it's very interesting. I think a lot of these newer innovations are going to come from people like me that are just messing around with these tools and using them in a creative way. Now, where I hope my role in the industry is going forward is I really want to make Curious Refuge a home for people who want to learn how to use AI in a filmmaking context. And so we're actually releasing a course in the next couple of weeks. Our pre-sale actually starts, I think, on the day that this podcast is going to go live. And we are going to have a workshop where we teach people the exact process that we use for these trailers, and then also how to inject humanity and movement into these projects. And that training will continue to update with the latest tools, and we want to have conversations with the people that are pushing the boundaries of these AI tools. And so I hope to do that, and it's anyone's guess as to what the future is going to hold and what the timeline is for all of these tools and how they're going to change our jobs. But I think it's very exciting, and it's definitely fun.
That's awesome. I mean, I think that's great. And, I remember when we talked about this, I was like, you should definitely make a class because, frankly, I want to get better at this, and I want to learn how you engineered the prompts the way you did and all that kind of stuff. But I think that a class like that, what I hope it does is it unlocks, like if I show this to my 12-year-old daughter, right? Like she's going to love it and she's going to want to do the same thing. And up until, Mid-Journey, there was no way for someone with zero training to make anything resembling what you've made, right? Right. I've actually shown my kids Mid-Journey and they love playing with it, and they a tomato breathing fire and there it is, right? And here's 4 of them. Pick one you like. And so I think that you really are actually like putting your money where your mouth is. You keep saying you want to help people, help creatives learn to make art, and I know it's also important to you, like it is for me, that they can make a living doing these things. And I think this is actually like a pretty big deal that you're going to show people exactly how you made this, because you're also a really good teacher, and I know that the class is going to be awesome. So aside from the class and, sort of you've got your day job and now you've got this opportunity that you're pursuing, what other things in the world of AI are you excited about or looking forward to testing out in the future?
Yeah, man. I mean, I was just this morning watching a Coca-Cola ad that utilized Stable Diffusion. Have you seen this?
I have seen it. It's incredible. Yeah.
I mean, my wheels are just spinning with the potential there. I think like AI, like making an actual AI film, probably like an AI short film, would be an interesting first step. But like within the next 12 months, there's going to be a feature that was created using AI. And so I'm very curious about what that could be and maybe being that person. But honestly, like I think as tools like Mid-Journey progresses and 11 Labs and DID, like I think we're going to start having, it's going to be a lot easier to put projects like this together. I think increasingly you're not going to have video editing skills like me to like comp faces or to do like cool movements and things like that. And so I think it's exciting. I think like all of these tools are democratizing creativity. Like it's allowing anyone in the world to like see a creative vision through into reality, and it's taking less time, less capital, and I don't know, man. I think I'm just excited to test every single small little tool that's popping up.
I want to say thank you very much, Caleb, for coming on. It was awesome to get to catch up with you and to find out how you built these amazing trailers and what you've been up to. Everybody, check out Caleb's stuff at curiousrefuge.com. You can also follow him on Twitter and Instagram and apparently TikTok. He's one of those. And he is, like he said, launching a course very soon teaching you how to actually do these AI films. So check the description. We'll link to it in there. And that's it for this one. Please subscribe to our channel so you can get notified next time we drop an awesome interview like this. And I'll see you on the next one.